Welcome to the Dealing with Goliath podcast. The mission of Dealing with Goliath is to sharpen the psychological edge in negotiation, ethical influencing, and high-impact conversations for business leaders who want to be more effective under pressure, uncover hidden value, and build greater connection, all while increasing profitability. This is the short-form espresso shot of insight podcast interview to boost business performance using our 5 questions in a roundabout 15-minute format. My guest today is Julie Keys. Julie is a certified exit planning advisor and founder of Key Strategies, specializing in exit and transition consulting, leveraging her extensive entrepreneurial experience. Understanding the challenges of ownership, she aids business owners in maximizing their exit and transition options. Julie is deeply involved with the Exit Planning Institute, contributing as a faculty member, a leadership council member, and is a 2-time recipient of EPI's Thought Leader of the Year Award. She is sought after speaker, and in 2021, she released the 2nd edition of Poised for Exit, a practical guide for private business owners on the business exit process, complemented by her weekly podcast, available on major platforms offering insights for business owners and advisors. She's also developed an online course, Business Transition Readiness, an owner's guide to the process, focusing on educating business owners on exit planning. Julie enjoys spending quality time with her family, including her 8 children and 10 grandchildren. That's a handful right there. Julie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Al. I sure appreciate being here. Thanks for inviting me. Took us a while to make this happen, but here we are. So
it did. And thank you. Yes, we persevered through all sorts of little setbacks and everything. So I appreciate you joining me for on the show today. So let's kick off. So who's your ideal client and what's the biggest challenge they face?
Sure. Ideal client would be a privately held owner of a business, closely held owners of a business, sometimes family business, sometimes partners, founders, and usually in the lower middle market space, which would constitute somewhere between maybe 10 and 100 million a year in revenue. Probably the biggest challenge that my clients face, well, they face many challenges. Entrepreneurship is not easy, but they're not prepared for their exit. And so they wait too long to take action, which really jeopardizes that nest egg. The truth is most business owners have most of their liquidity tied up in their business.
Right.
And if the business doesn't transition well, then the ripple effect of that is not good.
Very good, because there's a lot of listeners out there who this mightn't be on the top of their horizon right now, but as you say, it's a few years down the line. Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, it's down there somewhere. And you're talking about transition. So how long for you is ideal, to put those markers in? Because some people probably come to you and they want to sell it up in 6 months. And others people, maybe it's a year or 2 or more. What kind of do you need? What's optimum for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that it really depends on the owner and what type of transition they're looking to accomplish. Like, say, for instance, if you're a family business and you're planning to transition the business to a family member, and maybe that family member hasn't had any leadership experience.
Right.
The rule of thumb is 10 years.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. Well, think about it. If I'm a 65 or 70-year-old founder of a business, and I have a son or a daughter in the business who's 30 or something like that, and has worked for me for maybe 10 years or 8 years or whatever, but not necessarily in a CEO position, it takes a long time to groom that person to take over. And it also, you got all the employees, and we want to make sure that the respect is there and the transition is smooth and it doesn't damage the business. And that isn't my rule of thumb. That's actually coming from many family business centers that are usually tied to universities across the United States. Yeah, that's their rule of thumb. If you're not a family business and you're just wanting to sell to a third party, perhaps a strategic buyer or a private equity firm, you could probably accomplish what you need to in 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
And the whole process of what that looks like is a little bit complicated, and it can be very time consuming. And so if you're an owner who finds themselves in a position where you're behind, you haven't had a legal audit for a long time, maybe your agreements are outdated, your estate planning is outdated, your buy-sell agreement is outdated, you don't have your key people formally retained, kind of the list goes on and on. Maybe you need to have an audit of your financials because maybe the business has been paying a lot of your personal expenses and buyers don't like that. And it's a 3-year look back, right? So that's why we say 2 to 3 years, so that you can clean those things up and have your best foot forward, not just, under the hood, but appearances too, and doing all those things can be time consuming and expensive, right? If you
Sure.
need to revamp your website, if the list kind of goes on and on there. So 2 to 3 years, I know, long answer, but gosh, it's very common for an owner to say, well, I'm ready. And maybe they're emotionally ready, right?
Got it.
But they're not ready.
Understood. So what are some of the common mistakes people make when they're trying to, as you say, transition out of their business? So from what you've said already, the major one is waiting too late, not getting in there a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And the more time they can give to get their business and affairs in order, the better. But what are some of those other problems?
Well, like I alluded to, the emotional readiness is really important. And for those who aren't emotionally ready, because the business tends to be like their baby, and so they resist because it's their identity. It's who they are.
Yeah, it's a big thing when that thing is your identity. It is. A lot of your self-worth maybe is tied up in it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, just productivity, everything. And if you haven't imagined what your life could be like without your business, and really, honestly, that should be the best part of your life, right?
Sure.
We have to start thinking about what do we really want to do in our next act. When I talk to entrepreneurs, I don't talk about retirement because most of them aren't interested in retiring. They just want to go to the next thing, right? And so we just talk about what's next. What are we going to do next? And that takes a lot of introspection and courage, and just being really self-aware and realizing that it takes. This is another mistake that a lot of owners make. They don't have the proper advisory, and they try to DIY. So if they're finding that their accounting firm or their law firm, those are the two primary resources that they're going to be using right away. If they're finding that those advisors no longer can support and advise their business because it's grown to a point where they need an upgrade, then get an upgrade. Just do it.
Definitely.
Because, you got one shot usually at doing this right. And you definitely don't want incomplete or inaccurate information. And you don't want to leave money on the table.
And this just brings me very neatly to the next question, Julie. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So, because let's talk about the money on the table, just to really bring this point home to any listeners who might be, as you say, they're thinking, that's years in advance. The earlier you go, the better. What ballpark? I know it's how long is a piece of string, but with when you're working with the business, say for 2 or 3 years in advance, to get all their affairs in order, to get all the business primed and optimized for the buyer to be in such a great state that when they look at it, they go, this is a beautiful business, everything, I can see everything, it's all set up ready how I want it. They can see how they're going to use it, how they're going to integrate that business, or how they can run, how it's profitable, all those good things. Versus, as you said, a business that is not optimized. What sort of scale of difference might we be talking about here?
Gosh, I hate to use depends. It depends,
course,
right?
Of course.
But really, it does, because your EBITDA multiple on what you sell the business for can vary from industry to industry.
Of course.
And if your business is smaller, like say for instance, you're more of what we call a Main Street business. Say for instance, you're under 5 million a year in revenue, which would be called a Main Street business. Those businesses can sell, but they're harder to sell because they're perceived as a higher risk.
Right.
And if they're a higher risk, then they'll sell for a lower multiple. So anything that you can do to increase the value and make it turnkey, less dependent on the owner, right, always will increase your multiple. I've worked with plenty of owners, even in the lower middle market, who are still running their business and making all the decisions and are the face of the business. And so getting out of it makes it really tough because there's so much delegating that has to be done.
Exactly. And that again leads me into the next question. Thank you, Julie, which is what might be one valuable free action that the audience can implement that will help? Because it mightn't solve the problem, but at least they're thinking in the right way. And that's a major one, isn't it? Where they're taking themselves out of the day to day. So they're far more, as I said, a potential buyer can see them being replaced far easier, shall we say. They're not doing the day-to-day. They're not selling whatever the main thing they sell, product or service.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the best things that an owner could do, and really be honest with yourself, okay? What would it take for you to be gone for a month from your business?
Love it.
Really think about that. Who would have to take over? What would they take over? Do you have the people internally already in place that could? Because realistically, something could happen to you and you might be gone for a month, whether you want to be or not, right? People get sick.
Yep.
The older we get, the higher the likelihood of getting sick, or in a car accident, or God forbid something like that would happen. And you're away from work for a while, so somebody's got to take over for you. Like more than maybe somebody, right? You got to let go of that control because that's where you build the value in the business and you deserve it.
Absolutely. It's a great point. As I said, what are the standard operating procedures? What structures in place, as you say, for you to be able to step back for 2 weeks, for 4 weeks, for 6 weeks? How would that work? Absolutely. It's a great question to get people thinking in that direction. Absolutely. And the more, as you said, the more they can separate, usually the business is in a better state for sale, right?
Absolutely.
So, excellent stuff. So what might be one valuable free resource that you could direct people to that would help them on this journey?
Well, a couple. One would be they could go to my website and download my ebook that talks about the basics of the exit planning process. I have actually several free resources on my website that people can go to download. I have two websites, one at the keystrategies.com and then poisedforexit.com, where the podcast lives. That's free. And then several more resources for download on that website as well.
Excellent. And as I said, those will be underneath the video and indeed the podcast as well, of course. Great set of resources there. So I know you're a regular podcaster, so there's great value in that. So on that, what would be your number one insight or principle on how to negotiate, build rapport, connection, or uncover hidden value for your clients?
Well, like I said before, don't DIY.
It's a big one. Yeah.
When we're on the inside, it's very difficult for us to see the way things really are sometimes. And that's what we need advisors for. And I think that having a good, solid team of trusted advisors that can bring that perspective is worth everything. And yes, they cost money. But when you don't have good advice, that costs exponentially more.
Exactly.
And
the
so that would
loss is massive, right?
Yeah, it's the potential is huge for a complete derailment, and I've seen it happen. And so don't do that to yourself. Just get good advice. Start the process, and that would be your eyes would be opened. You'd learn a lot through that process, and as you're doing that, then you'll be able to make more clear decisions. And good, educated decisions are your best decisions because this is your life, right? Not your life, just your life, but your family, your employees. So just dive in, And the, first step to a 1,000,000-mile journey is in your hands to take. So.
Outstanding stuff. And where can people find you? You mentioned the poisedforexit.com website. Can people reach out to you on LinkedIn? You're quite active on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Lots of stuff going on LinkedIn all the time.
Excellent. And of course, that's Julie Keys on LinkedIn. And again, the link will be below this episode. Julie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Al. I sure appreciate it. You have a great show, and wonderful to be here to share with your audience. Thanks so much.
Very kind. Thanks again, Julie. Cheers.